Hello, I'm Peter Best, and this is Meet the Expert, the podcast series brought to you by Boehringer Ingelheim that talks about topical aspects of swine health management in practice. This episode completes the first season of Meet the Expert, and we thought we'd mark the occasion by signing off with a slightly less serious podcast than normal. With me is Dr. Marius Kunze, who is Global Technical Manager for Swine at Boehringer Ingelheim. And he's been the driving force behind establishing this podcast series and making it happen. Marius, hello. When you look back on season 1 of Meet the Expert, Marius, what will you recall most about it?
Thank you, Peter. Yes, welcome everybody. You are very well known for asking challenging questions, Peter, and this is one of them, because this is really difficult to point out or pick one particular key feature or one particular event that took place. Looking back to season number 1, I really appreciate the entire journey a lot. Having this project started in beautiful Brittany, where we had the possibility to interview so many key opinion leaders from the swine world. That was a fantastic start for the project, and the ditch that we had in the summer with the COVID outbreak, or probably in April, and then adapting that content to a virtual environment. So it has always been a challenge, and it was not really an easy ride, but a very fun one, I have to say.
Yes, you're right enough. But even before the online conversations had to start, you talked about Brittany. We were in Rennes, weren't we? And what listeners never knew was that we were, in fact, in a soccer stadium recording those things, which went very well until they decided to cut the grass on the football pitch.
And even before that, right? Because we went to that hotel, and as we arrived in the hotel, we figured out they didn't even have a quiet room for us, and then they suggested to us that we recorded in the breakfast room, in this echoing breakfast room where the words were bouncing from left to right.
Yes, it was a wooden shell, wasn't it? Yes, exactly that. So that was a fun start, and I'm quite sure that I would agree with you. It's very difficult to pick out memories of the first season, and the last thing we want to do is pick out any particular expert. And I would, Marius, like to just express my thanks again to those people we've been talking to.
Absolutely.
Because they were fascinating. And again, listeners, you might know that many of those people we've talked to, this was their first experience of doing a podcast. They're very used to lecturing students or talking to farmers or whatever.
Absolutely.
But this business of being interrogated, as Marius said, by a computer was a first for them as well. And my hat off comes off to them all for how they managed that and how very patient and agreeable they were, as well as informative. So anyway, that's that. Marius, you talked about, the challenges of the online beginnings that we had to work out. One of the other things I must say was a challenge was that we set ourselves that each podcast would be about 30 minutes long. And we've followed that guideline ever since, as you know, but 30 minutes, my goodness, that could go by like the blink of an eye. And as the host, it's been absolutely horrific for me to stop people talking at a certain time. You don't want to say stop, especially when they're coming to something you've waited half an hour to hear. It's sometimes you think, no, I'm going to have to let them finish what they're saying, and this is important. And so this 30 minutes became a real nightmare for me. I'm surrounded by clocks and watches and everything to try to stick to it. And then I'm thinking, I don't think I want to stop this at all. Anyway,
Absolutely.
that was certainly one of the challenge. The other is being as topical and up to date as possible. I'm thinking, Marius, of African swine fever in particular. It seemed to me that every conversation I had with an expert was followed almost immediately afterwards by an official announcement from some country or another about the disease in Europe. And it was really interesting how we sometimes even anticipated what some of the things that were happening. And I think, Marius, that African swine fever, for when we come to tell our listeners about season 2, I don't think we're done with African swine fever yet. I think there's more to be said there, and we'd be happy to do that. When you talk about season 1, Marius, I mean, you're a vet yourself, a swine veterinarian. You've listened to all these podcasts like our listeners have. I mean, the knowledge and insights that the experts have shared with us about multiple health issues in swine has been fascinating. But for me, I have to say, as a non-vet, it's been great to be reminded several times there remains a great deal we can learn about the health and well-being of the pigs under our care simply by spending a bit of time in the barn just observing and listening. And it seems to me that's an old story, but one that's never going to go out of date.
And that was the initial start for the episodes, right? That were the first episodes that we recorded with...
Yes. Dr. Stevenson was talking about the coughing. Pig with purrs, how it sounds.
Yes, absolutely. He's one of a kind.
Yes. He prepared to actually mimic the cough, which I think I wouldn't have had the nerve to do that.
But that was fascinating. And I remember he just arrived from Ames, Iowa, came out of the plane. And he asked us where should we start, and we brought him to the hotel room, to my hotel room, and we had to feed him with espresso to keep him awake. But he was so brilliant in explaining that mechanism, and this is something I really like about him, because he is able or you are able, just by listening, to understand pathology. You don't really have to learn it. It just makes so much sense when he's explaining the disease and the mechanism, and also the clinical impact. This was absolutely fascinating.
Yes, I agree with you. I think it's something that's not just PERS, which was that particular first episode, but across the board. If you take it from the point of view of pathology, you suddenly understand what you're seeing in a farm situation and in the early signs and so on. There is a reason pigs cough and these other things, or die or whatever it is, and it's helpful to get that. Marius, at the other side, I mean, as I say, as a non-vet, I was interested in the talk of pen-side tests and oral fluids as an alternative to serology and testing and so on. But we've also heard about the evolution of viruses in season 1. Of course, in another area, so surely one of the most topical issues of the year. Among swine pathogens, it's clear that evolving viruses demand both renewed vigilance against agents we thought we had firmly under our control and focus on appropriate vaccination responses. From your veterinarian point of view, there was much which was applicable at a field level, even in that evolution discussion, wasn't there?
Yeah, and this is something really surprising, because we really have the opportunity here to interview world opinion leaders on their field of expertise, and you would probably know when you're long enough in the business that you have the assumption, okay, you know so much about influenza, you know so much about guild acclimatization, you know so much about mutating viruses like PERS or parvovirus, what is new about parvovirus. And while you are talking to these world opinion leaders, these key opinion leaders, you find so many new aspects and so many new things to think about and to rethink how to rethink our action, how we have dealt with disease, how we have dealt with animals, and this is absolutely fascinating.
Yes, it's almost like sort of rewriting the textbooks in my case. I mean, the only knowledge I have is from the textbooks, and I'm surprised how quite recent textbooks have been out of date when you listen to our
Absolutely,
experts
yeah. Like
on these control measures.
Yeah, and like Professor Wojciechowski, a very recent scientific information about the spread of African swine fever. We just recorded another podcast. This is going to be played in season number 2 with Klaus Deppner, also a fascinating researcher. It's really difficult now because I fall into the trap that I didn't want to fall in the beginning to pick out specific names.
Oh yes, we're not being rude to the others. So those, I mean, some of the others have been so delightful.
Absolutely, and with every single episode, it was absolutely fascinating to listen to like top virologists like Professor Hans Nauing, Professor Enric Matteo. We had Professor Andrea Ladinik from Vienna sharing her experience with high pathogen PRRS. We had Pia Ritt Hansen, fascinating researcher on influenza. Lars-Erik Larsen from Denmark, swine consultant, Carmen Alonso, breaking down the rules of biosecurity to farm level.
Talking about the use of visual aids, don't forget
absolutely,
that. I think that was really something that I've gone away and thought, right, putting it across to people who work on the farm, supervisors or farrowing barn attendants or whatever. And, we're dealing with people from different nationalities, different languages, different backgrounds, and we're trying to make a team where we're doing things in a sensible way. And those conversations, like with Dr. Alonso, I think were fascinating. And it was, you mentioned Dr. Deppner. He's one I know who's strongly in favor of, the role of education in the widest sense, both for within the farm, but also, as far as disease control is concerned, but for the general public, because, disease, as he says, is a human factor. It's not. It's not so much the pigs; it's the people. And those I think are certainly things which have been my take homes on that sort of area. When you listen to them, though, and I'm going to come back to this business of the evolution of viruses and so on. It is quite remarkable to me that these people who are, after all, academic, they're very close to the field in their understanding and their ability to relate what they're seeing in a virus, for example, to what is happening in the field. And that, to me, I really hadn't expected. I thought they'd be sort of in some sort of ivory tower, but not a bit of it.
Right. And therefore, Peter, I'm super happy to have you because you have the ability of not being a vet and therefore ask very practical questions. And
I think stupid questions is what I asked.
I don't want to be rude. No. Peter, if this question would be stupid, we wouldn't have so many listeners.
They probably enjoy the stupid questions. Gives them a laugh while they're driving along or whatever it is they're doing when they're listening to our podcast. I would say season 1's been a good start. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I don't want to forget, I have not mentioned yet, if I'm not mistaken, Professor André-Philippe Streck, who's one of the few researchers focusing on parvovirus. And you could assume parvovirus, what's new about parvovirus? And just listen to his 2 episodes. Absolutely fascinating what he is explaining about the evolution of the virus. And not mistaken, I have also to mention my friend Paul-Henning Radtjen, who was doing a fantastic interview during our event in Rennes.
That's right. We were talking sequencing and so on, which,
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
I understood it, which is, there's no greater compliment can you give to somebody than they can tell me sequencing of a pathogen and make it clear.
Right, yeah. He
Um,
said it's like taking out just one side of the book and then trying to compare the two books.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, yes.
uh,
No, it was certainly good. I think all of them though have been really great choices, and I'm glad that you say we've got some very good people lined up for season two, and that our listeners will more than find that these episodes that you have for season two, they'll more than repay the time spent listening to them. And of course, I hope, Marius, that our listeners will continue to give us feedback, because that's always going to be extremely helpful to us in shaping these
Absolutely, yeah,
episodes and
yeah,
knowing what is
yeah,
needed. And I talked about length of episodes and all sorts of things like that. We can certainly adapt to our listeners,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's what we inevitably
yeah.
will do. What we got for season two, then, just very quickly, we're going to run out of time, aren't we? But what have we got for season two?
Peter, before we come to season number 2, you said that one of your biggest challenge was to squeeze all the information into 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And one of my mistakes was that I every time I told the people in the as we did the debrief for our interview guest as well as the debrief with you, I said, oh, no worries, this is a podcast episode and we can easily cut out content that if it's too long, the answer to fit it into 30 minutes. But so far, we haven't really done that because as I was listening then to the raw material from the interview, there was so many valuable information in it that I just was not able to cut out parts of the conversation to shorten it to a time frame.
So you cut out my questions instead, then, right?
Probably in season number 2. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay, season number 2. Right. So as I say, what have you got lined up? And our listeners won't want anything more than just headlines at the moment. What sort of subjects have we got lined up?
Yeah, probably. It's now everybody is taking a rest. We are at the end of the year. It's a few days before Christmas, and everybody's drinking Glühwein and eating cookies or preparing the turkey or wearing the Christmas sweater. But you have been very busy in the last weeks, Peter, and you have. I'm very happy about that because you were able to record really a couple of nice episodes that we are going to launch next year, beginning of next year, I guess. And these are with swine practitioners on area regional control in Denmark, on guild acclimatization in Europe, on we have Clayton Johnson guild acclimatization in the US. As we talked about, we had Klaus Deppner informing us about the link between ASF and human behavior. So they are really.
And then, of course, you've got Dr. Rutger Janssen, with my favourite topic so far,
because it's super
if
practical,
I can call it that, which has been colostrum management.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where we're dealing with these larger litters born these days, and the need to make sure these pigs get their start in life. So, I think that's going to be great as well. And that we've got some episodes with Dr. Janssen, who studied this very closely. And so, I think we've got a good start. And guilt acclimatization, I think, is one of those subjects where we can never do enough reviews of that, because we know, all of us, what we should be doing, but so few of us do it in practice for all sorts of practical reasons. And so, it's trying to get something between the optimum and the practical, and making that work, and making it work from a health management point of view. It's going to be interesting to talk to those people. Yes, but you mentioned Dr. Ruth Hansen, and her reference to influenza A virus as her favourite virus. And I must admit, in season 2, everybody I speak to, I'm almost tempted to say, what's your favourite virus? And get from them. I guess everybody's got one they've studied more than anything else.
I guess so, yeah.
But I think they're all fascinating. So season 2 is on the stocks listers. That's very good. But Marius, I think we have taken up enough of our listeners' time. Listeners, you've heard what Marius and I have to say about season 1. Now, how about reliving some of those moments in our podcast when things did not go exactly to plan? As we say goodbye for this season, from Marius and from me, here are some outtakes for you to enjoy. Have a good time over the Christmas period. We'll see you next year. Goodbye. Thanks.
Goodbye and Happy Christmas, everybody.
Hello, welcome to this edition of Meet the Expert, a new series of podcasts on swine disease management in practice presented by Boehringer Ingelheim. My name is Peter Best. I didn't like that so much, Patrick. Ready, steady, go. Stop. Reproduct.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what the magic thing here is. Okay.
Sound test. You okay? Okay, yep, we're ready.
We're ready.
We're ready. Okay. And you are ready? So, okay. Let's try, and as I say, forgive me if I make a mess of this. Okay. With us is Dr. PH. Sorry, stop. I'll just continue that. Just continue that. Okay, stop and go again. Dr. Paul Henning. Stop. I shouldn't have called you PH. Take 2 just from there. We've done Hans, so I'll just go from Paul. Yeah. Let's try, and as I say, forgive me if I make a mess of this.
It will be helpful, but Peter, I don't know what to say here. And I'm sorry, and I got lost.
General end, take 3. You have been listening to a Meet the Take 4. This episode ends our first season of Meet the Expert podcast. So I want to thank you, the listeners, for joining us in this series, and our interview guests for their expertise and participation. We'll be back next year with new episodes, so stay tuned. On behalf of everyone on the Meet the Expert team and Boehringer Ingelheim, we wish you all an enjoyable and peaceful Christmas holiday. Goodbye.